Holy shit, is The Mandalorian a great fucking show or what? Whew. Oh man, I can't wait. I have some like very hectic schedule very hectic travel, and I have a crazy schedule this week. So your episode of TIE Fighter Renegades might be coming out just a little bit late, but I cannot wait. Rob and I are both chomping at the bit to talk about The Mandalorian because it's that damned good. And I mean, it is. And it really, it just gives so much hope for Star Wars. It really, And Rob was right. Rob even said that in the last TIE Fighter Renegades. He says, I think Mandalorian's going to set things, start to set things right. Not to quote, Laura Santeca, right. Yeah, there again. But, something that's not good. Let me tell you about this for a minute. We got a couple of great questions that we're going to get into. We will, as I promised, we will definitely get into the BDSM question that was asked a couple weeks ago. We're going to get into that. And we actually have a question that kind of has to do with entertainment, but also has a lot to say about the future and the future of tech, in my opinion. And it has to do with my review of Terminator Dark Fate. Again, I don't think that movie can really be spoiled for you. Except the very beginning, which I don't have to talk about here. So I think, whether or not you've seen the movie, you give a shit about entertainment or whatever, I think you're going to get something out of it. So do listen for that. But we'll get into both of those in a second. But something that so speaking of shows to be done, I mean, I'm going to tell you, I'll give it until Picard comes out. You understand? And I warned about this about a year ago, that it could be tough to do to do Sovereign Trek, or what used to be called the Star Trek Update. That it could be tough to keep that going because there's not as much Star Trek coming out all the time as there is, like, say, so much Star Wars, which it's very easy to talk about that. I mean, hell, Rob and I could probably talk about that every day, or, every week at least. And I mean, the once a month thing works, and, both he and I have we all have crazy schedules. The whole world has a crazy schedule because the whole world's nuts, right? Myself included, as far as being nuts. But anyway, something I've mentioned is that, doing Sovereign Trek could be a tall order. Now, I mean, now it's not necessarily an issue of there not being content. Now it's more of an issue of, just what's going on in Star Trek is horrible. It's all bad. And even things that excited me in Star Trek that were kind of still going on. Like the comic books are somewhat interesting, even though we don't know where any of that is going any further. And the only comic books that are coming out, as far as we know, are Discovery tie-ins, which fuck Discovery, right? We even have a new Discovery novel coming out, in a few days, actually, beginning of December. I already have that, I pre-order Star Trek and Star Wars books. I pre-order them months ahead of time. But anyway, so there are episodes of Sovereign Trek that need to be done. Review What We Left Behind. We've been promising that for a while. That's going to happen. There are some other subjects that I want to get into. There are some things that do need to be reviewed. Some books that have come out. Some comic books that I still want to review for everyone to be able to check out. And frankly, it's okay while with TIE Fighter Renegades, I like to talk about the comic books as they're coming out. It is okay in general with comic books to talk about them when the series is not necessarily done, but when the when the trade paperbacks, right? When the graphic novel versions that collect at least a cohesive story instead of like to be continued every goddamn month, come out. And so that's fine that I'll be reviewing a few of these as a cohesive whole. Even if the trade paperback's not out yet or whatever, or if the series has been done for a month or two, kind of like the Q comic book that just came to an end, as well as Star Trek versus Transformers. But anyway, what I want to tell you about quickly, because I'm not sure when I'll have the next Sovereign Trek out, is I cannot, in good conscience, and believe me, this is a depressing thing for me. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of life, okay? I know its place. But it is disappointing. I'm somebody who, I get accused of being a minimalist a lot. That's really not something I do, intentionally, okay? Like, I don't count my shit. Like there's minimalists who are like, okay, you can only have 30 things or however many articles of clothing and stuff like this. I don't do that on purpose. With intent. I don't own a lot, but that, and I guess to some degree that's by design, kind of fitting in with the whole, maybe a bit of the Fight Club mentality of, what you end up owning, or what you own ends up owning you, right? And this is going to be an interesting conversation a little bit later on. But anyway, I don't own a lot of things, but it's something that, and I've never been one, not since I was a teenager. And it's not because I think that toys are for kids. The exact opposite is or maybe the exact opposite is true, or certainly that part is not true. I should say the exact opposite is also true, right? That toys can very much be for adults, and most of the toys bought today are bought by adults, as far as we know from market data. But I've never really been much of a collector since I was a teenager. I mean, I went into the military, and I was traveling so much, it didn't fit. It just wasn't a fit for me. But something that I thought was so goddamn cool that I've been collecting for a few years now are the starships, the Star Trek starships from Eaglemoss, the company Eaglemoss. Actually, I even have a couple Batmobiles from them that I've gotten over the years. And I don't buy many of these. They release new ones, it seems like almost every couple weeks or every month. And I sure as hell, don't afford that situation. And, I'm not getting, you could count the amount I have. Well, not with your fingers, but maybe your fingers and toes. I mean, I really don't have that many. But they do come out with some absolutely, or over the years, they have come out with some absolutely beautiful ones. But I want to put this out there because I've been so supportive of this company for a while, and I'll probably talk about this on the Sovereign Trek if it comes up, but I can no longer be supportive of this company. They are, first off, the quality of their wares, okay, the quality of these ships. Now, they're supposed to be die-cast ships. They average about 5 inches a pop. There's bigger ones that are in the 9 to 12-inch range, which I'm familiar. Well, no joke there. Anyway, everything comes in different sizes, you know what I mean? So, but these ships, and again, die-cast, so that means that they're supposed to be largely metal. Well, over the years, I have noticed a trend where they have become far less metal, and they are much more plastic. Now, some of these, it makes sense, because some of these are these wild starships that are so intricate. If you made them metal, I mean, I can't even imagine what the casts alone would cost to do that. It doesn't make good business sense. And I understand that. And one could ultimately say it makes good business sense to make them out of less plastic. And I understand that. But they definitely, we're talking about things, most things, not much larger than a Hot Wheel, than a Hot Wheels car. And Hot Wheels over the years has actually put out, their die-cast starships, with varying franchises. They also put out somewhat larger ships during when the Kelvin timeline movies were hot, which frankly had much better quality and cost half, if not less than half, significantly less than half the price of what Eaglemoss puts out there. Now, I get it that Eaglemoss is a small company, but they must not just be they must not just be a small company, they must be a very small company. Because for one, one of my issues here that I have with them is, I can get into my concerns around their wares, okay, and I will. But real quick, their customer service is practically non-existent. Just non-existent. Your best bet, if you're to do this at all, is to and I hate to even recommend this because fuck Amazon, but is to if you can, order these ships on Amazon, because at least that way you have some kind of return policy, because their return policy is terrible. They have sales all the time. And there was a recent sale, this is maybe 2 months ago or something, where they're like, okay, yeah, if you buy this and this by such a date, we'll give you a coupon for $15 off your next order. And I was like, okay, so I wanted such and such ship, and I did that and waited for my coupon, and we are now 2 months or so later, and I've yet to get that coupon, and we're also about 4 emails deep that I have sent them, and I've tried calling them, and they don't pick up their phone, and just asking, hey, can I get this fucking coupon? And there was also a delay in the shipment of it, and what I even ended up getting with that was the ship it was the Scimitar from Star Trek Nemesis. Now, this is a very, very intricate, complex ship, it's this giant Riemann warbird ship. It's huge. This thing was so cheap. Like the wings were entirely plastic and they were like bending. The plastic was so thin, they were already kind of bending up. It was bad. Now, I would almost forgive that if one of the main reasons that I've gotten a lot of these Eaglemoss ships is because I am a guy who I take reality very seriously, but I also take my fiction very seriously. I am just as passionate about reading tech manuals and, like cryptographic papers in real life as I am of reading tech manuals that are fictional, right? Like the Star Trek Next Generation Technical Manual or whatever, okay? And I've reviewed these, including ones from Eaglemoss. I've reviewed them on Sovereign Trek. Even recently, the last episode of Sovereign Trek, I actually reviewed their Shipyards line of books. And look, I have their latest one here. It's the Shipyards book about Federation members. It has a ton of Vulcan ships in it and everything. Now, a lot of these are collecting tech information from ships that they have released. Again, they've been doing this for years now. But so you get a magazine with each of these ships, okay? And this magazine, the reason I love the magazine almost as much, if not more, depending upon the vessel, as I like the little model ship. Because these magazines have incredible technical data in them, answering questions that I've always had, that at least I get some kind of answer. Whether or not, CBS would treat it as canon later on, I'd really, really like to know, I expect to get at the very least the size of these ships, and get other information about them. Well, the quality, just like the quality of the ships have gone down, of the models that they put out, the quality of the magazines have, to say that they've gone downhill is an understatement. There is clearly no editor there anymore. The editing problems are through the fucking roof, including in the magazine for the aforementioned Riemann Warbird the Scimitar, right? Where this really started to become a problem for me was when they first put out a model, because I jumped on this when they released it, when they first put out a model of the Enterprise from Discovery. And because I wanted that magazine so bad, because I wanted to find out, okay, what are the tech specs of this fucking ship? I want to hear the explanation of how this thing fits, the how and why it fits into the Prime timeline universe, right? The magazine, that didn't come until months after I got the ship, which that's a problem too, and it's one that is very common right now with Eaglemoss. What happens if you move? Right? Like it takes so long for these to come out. I know people that move like every 6 months. Fortunately I'm fairly stable where I'm at, but it gets in. Some people move quite a bit, and what, they have to set up a PO box? No, when they buy something from Eaglemoss and it says you're going to get a ship and a magazine, you should get the fucking ship and a magazine, or at least you should get the magazine in a reasonable amount of time, and you don't, like literally months. Another one, I got the USS Bonaventure, and I got the magazine months later. Both of those magazines have almost no technical data in them whatsoever, which again is what they're schlepping on you. It's the purpose of it. It's how they're selling these these book collections, like Star Trek Shipyards, which I've reviewed, which are generally very good, but I get the feeling they're going to get much worse because again, the editor, I don't know where the fuck the editor's at. It's pretty bad, and so. The bulk of the time now in these magazines, all you're getting is like little recaps of what happens in certain episodes that maybe featured what's in it, and you get no technical data. Even if they just made it up, make it up, but give us something like that. That's the joy of it, right? And that's why you're holding the ship, because you're imagining what it's like to be in that ship, and that magazine, smartly on Eaglemoss's part, is supposed to anyway, and used to, give you more information so that you could basically do that. So you can get, you can connect more, right, with your purchase. Makes all the sense in the world. It's the same. G.I. Joe back in the 80s did very well with this, right? Because they put the combat cards on the back. They gave you a description and, like the height of the guy and the specialties and all this. And everybody went nuts about that. And people were, collected the cardboard, the combat cards on the back of the cardboard box that the figure came in. as much as they collected the figures, because they just wanted to know it, and it just livened everything up, you know, and it gave you more bang for your buck with your purchase. It was a brilliant marketing move, and Eaglemoss is just tanking because of this. So the bottom line is, their customer service is shit. You know, and every time I've emailed them, they keep saying, "Oh, we have higher, I don't know, whatever the contact traffic is, whatever it says, is higher than normal. You know, they're super busy. They've been busy for months. Pull it together. Clearly, they're able to make it to conventions, because I've seen them at conventions. Okay, like I see stories about them at conventions where they're announcing new ships and everything coming out. I don't know what they're doing, and like they deal in not just Star Trek, but really some of the biggest franchises out there: DC, Battlestar Galactica, Harry Potter. You know, it's in DC Comics, but Harry Potter, Alien versus, you know, Alien and Predator. They have all these massive franchise contracts. So I got to believe that they're making some kind of numbers look good with the companies that own these licenses. But me as a customer, I mean, I'm just fucking pissed off. I think their stuff it's absolutely gone to shit. And that's a shame, because these were a special joy. It was one of the few things that I would actually like purchase. And I mean, they're not expensive, you know, necessarily. Depends on what you're buying, but they're not like expensive things. Otherwise I wouldn't bother with them. But still, you know, you're putting money down, and you should be getting what you've expected over the years. So I don't know what's going down there. What is happening at that company? It looks like there's a million places where they're cutting costs. Like so I got the Battlestar Galactica, like the original one. You know me, I wouldn't buy the new one. And the little magazine that it comes with is just that. It's little, like they cut it to a quarter of the size. So they must be running into some kind of issues there. I don't know if the company's going to tank or what, but they've got to be in some real trouble. But the stuff that they're putting out, the magazines are not informative at all. Their editors are gone. I think their writers are fucking gone. The quality, there's so much plastic. That Scimitar was a total drop ball. And look, if you didn't think there was going to be, you know, if you went cheap on the Scimitar because you're like, well, nobody likes Star Trek Nemesis, so we're going to put it out, you know, we won't make it, we don't expect it to sell a lot. Okay, then make it one of your smaller ships instead of one of your special editions, which is what they did, you know, the slightly more expensive ones. And just put it out as like the smaller model. And then, you know, it's going to hold better since it's smaller anyway. And that just would have made more sense. But like, you got part of the reason I wanted the Scimitar is, I mean, I already know what it looks like in my head, but I wanted a bunch of technical information about that fucking thing. And I got nothing. I mean, there's pretty much practically nothing out of that. And it's a pity, because some of these magazines, like the magazine for the USS Vengeance from Star Trek Into Darkness, was so brilliant. It was so informative, and it told you about, like, even if they didn't give you exact tech specs, but they still did. Even if they didn't, they told you so much about like what production designers had in mind. They must have gone out and done interviews with people, and they tell you so many little things that you didn't even notice that were on the ship before, and even like the philosophy behind the ship. It was so cool. I mean, you'd read it over and over again. It's like, wow, they had so many brilliant ideas for this thing, and now you just don't get any of that. They really I think they've gotten fucking lazy, and they're pulling a lot of cheap stunts, and they're making cheap product. I can't recommend them, you know, and that's a pity, because I want to, you know, and I don't know, you know, maybe the problem is that CBS is like, oh no, look, you can't say that. You know, just like in Star Wars, where it feels like they're constantly holding back information, and they want people to just kind of like make everything in, you know, like Star Wars books and whatever, to make them as broad as possible. That way you don't interfere with the canon. Maybe CBS is saying something like that. I don't know. But I have a hard time believing that, especially with some of these. So it's really disappointing. Very clear money grabs. You know, you actually want to know another, like, now they're pulling this stuff. And I remember when there was a company called Johnny Lightning that did this about 20 years ago, because they had Star Trek ships. In fact, I still have my Annex 01 from them. But they started selling, like, for like Klingon ships and Romulan ships, they would sell cloaked versions of them, where it was just the same model in fucking clear plastic. And now Eaglemoss is doing that. And I get it, it's a money grab, but it just, I don't know. It feels cheap. It feels really, really cheap. And I mean, that's a minor thing compared to everything else I was talking about. You're genuinely getting shitty product now, both in the magazine and in the ships themselves. So, yeah, just disappointed about that. Anyway, okay, enough about that. I didn't expect to talk about that for 20 minutes, but I wanted to get that out somewhere. Just to warn you, if you're into these things like I am, or if you've ever thought about getting into them. And I've even said I wish Eagle Moss would get the Star Wars license. I don't want them to get the Star Wars license now. I don't know what the fuck they would do with that. I'm terrified that they would fuck that up. So yeah, no thanks. Anyway, okay, let's get into our questions for this week. This episode, because of my travel schedule, this episode's actually going to be coming out earlier on in the week. But anyway, let's do it. Okay, so Man of Tomorrow. Totally dug your review of Dark Fate, and I agree it was a very... he's talking about Terminator Dark Fate. And I agree it was a very lacking movie for the franchise. And for those that haven't heard it yet, in episode 350 of Sovereign Tech, at the end of it, I did a review of Terminator Dark Fate. And I guess quickly I can just say I gave it a 7. Ellen also gave it a 7. We both reviewed it. Or we both had our thoughts on it, even though I was the only one talking at the end of that episode. But anyway, so yeah, okay, it was a very lacking movie for the franchise. Something that I thought was anachronistic. Something that I thought was anachronistic in the film was that the character of Grace was an augment. While it made for a new kind of hero in the series, though it did remind me of the hero in Salvation, it also seemed like the Terminator movies weren't warning us about the machines anymore, but telling us the solution is to become one. I found this to be way out of place in the franchise, and if James Cameron and Tim Miller were arguing with each other about the movie, I could imagine James Cameron having a big problem with this. What is the Man of Tomorrow's take on the Men of Tomorrow here? Keep slaying. Episode 350 was a stick of TNT in the tech world. Woo, thank you. And I will keep doing so. And it's great. Actually, like the sponsor situation is doing very, very well with the show. People are finding value in it. Of course, we just added on the Free State Project as a sponsor. If you heard that just before the Terminator Dark Fate review in episode 350. Anyway, so... yeah, all right, let's talk a little bit about this. This is something that I actually brought up to Ellen when we left. I said, and I know what you're saying, because at first I thought the same thing. But I think the movie, not openly, but kind of quietly decries the idea that being an augment is a solution. Okay? I mean, I thought Mackenzie Davis was great in the movie. I thought she did a great job. She can really pull off the intensity. She can clearly handle the nudity well, which, has always been a part of the Terminator saga. So yeah, I was like, oh no, they're saying that it takes, merging with machines to, save the day. I mean, that's kind of what happens, but the fact that Grace is constantly having to, like, she has to inject herself with whatever, that mixture of all those different things, whatever pills that she puts into, a needle or whatever she puts in there. I think that's a way of saying, oh, this is not such a great thing. And in fact, we never really got to find out what would happen, because originally they were going to use an EMP to stop the Terminator Rev 9, right? We never got to find out what would happen if an EMP was set off with Grace right there. Would the EMP have ultimately killed her? It also, would have killed Carl, right? It would have killed Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, but would have shut him down. But would it have shut down, Grace as well? I think the movie. I mean, one of the things that I kind of mentioned in my review was that the movie definitely felt like it was leaving a lot on the table. Like there were a lot of things that were clearly, or that were left in the editing room, right? They were left on the editing room floor. That floor must be covered, because I feel like you can see it in the film where things are spliced just a little too harshly. Okay. So, and with that in mind, I think that there might have been a lot more points where Grace would have either shown, or the future would have shown, or something would have shown that being an augment is a very much a last resort. It is not considered a good thing. It is not optimal. It is not what humans of the future want. In fact, I mean, she doesn't want to be, Grace doesn't want to become an augment until she's about to die in the future, right? So I do feel like and maybe James Cameron, got that in there. Maybe, I could see that. I don't know what Tim Miller's thoughts on all this are. We can have somewhat of an idea of the philosophy of James Cameron. Tim Miller is kind of new to the game, and we don't really know his philosophy, especially since it's been so couched in comedy so far, really, in his career. What I know of him, anyway. So, yeah, I was worried initially going into this movie, what I knew of it, that it was going to have a transhumanist message. But I don't think it is. I think it's actually kind of the opposite, saying that, I mean, yeah, there's advantages to it, but that it is not what humans really want. Okay. Because, I mean, the way that, like, even in that movie, the Rev 9 could, quote unquote, hack into just about like any system, you'd think they could hack into the augments. I don't understand why he really didn't even try. And I mean, that's something that happened in Terminator 3, right? Where the TX, which clearly, clearly the Rev 9 Terminator was based off of, the TX was able to actually control, Arnold's T-101 in Terminator 3, because it could hack another machine, right? And that was like kind of the amazing thing about the TX too, right? Was that the TX was a machine that was designed to kill other machines, not just humans, which made it such an effective character. Again, is more that explanation that we just didn't get for the Rev 9, right? That we got so much of in Terminator 3. So, yeah, I mean, that didn't really get explained very well, but I don't feel like, I mean, look, this movie's good, but again, like I said, it has so many problems. I really think they should have taken as strong a stance as they took on smartphones, which I'm glad they did. Okay, they really should have taken a stronger stance on the potential of reading into this as like being a transhuman, or being an augment, human augmented with, or basically being a cyborg is not a great thing. Like, I would have loved if they talked about that more. Now, understand me, okay? Just understand, and I want to talk about the salvation thing too, okay? Actually, let me talk about that quick. Then I'll get into the understand me here, okay? Where I'm coming from, because I know I have listeners who are very transhumanist positive, shall we say, that's kind of punny, because H+, right? That's a symbol for transhumanism. But the character in Salvation, the hero in Salvation, who he thinks he's human, right? But he's actually a machine. What was his name? The actor was Sam Worthington or whatever, right? I was worried that movie was definitely pushing for some kind of transhumanist message within it. Salvation was definitely seemed to be far more positive on the matter, and I think there's some wacky message inside of Salvation in just the movie, not in anything outside of Salvation. Because like I said, the comic books and the novels that are based around Salvation are actually really, really solid. They're really great. The movie itself, okay, right? No. But I do think that movie was shooting for some kind of weird transhumanist message, as to where I don't think so much. I understand where you got that from in Dark Fate, but I don't really think that was there. Anyway, so once again, but I think that's another, so it's funny because I feel like the Terminator, and I bring this up because I think the Terminator Rev 9 was basically copying the TX, the Terminatrix, from Terminator 3. And I think very much Grace was just copying the hero, the cyborg or the whatever hero from Terminator Salvation. So neither was really an original idea. They were stealing from two other films, which, I think weakens it as well, because it's things that we've seen before. Even though, again, Dark Fate does pull off some action sequences that I don't think I've ever seen before, which I thought was really impressive. So that's disappointing. Anyway, now, to understand me, okay, I know I have listeners who are very supportive of transhumanism, okay? Now, Ellen actually brought up a great point to me. a while back. This is long before we watched the Terminator movie, but or Dark Fate. But she brought up a great point to me that she said, she basically, I think we were driving to the gym, and she said, Brian, it's like, no, you're a transhumanist. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not. And I mean, and she knows me as well as anyone can. And she, and she's like, no, you are. It's just you want to, transhumanism. Basically what she was getting at is that the abstract notion of transhumanism is that you become more than human, right? And she's like, that's still you. But I guess for me it'd be more of a kind of a Nietzschean sense. And easy, folks. Nietzsche's work was bastardized by the Nazis. Don't go thinking that anybody's promoting like some kind of Ubermensch that needs to off everybody else. Okay, that's Nazism. That's not Nietzsche. Read Nietzsche and actually understand what he fucking said. And get context instead of what pop psychology tells you or whatever. Anyway, yeah, like I get it. Okay. That there are people, and you know what, that's fine. Like if there are people who you want to be a cyborg, you want to attach yourself, Neuralink, you want to, jack in a hard drive into your brain, you want to attach whatever, cybernetic parts to you and blah, 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 and live forever in all this, and become something better or, whatever. And that's a subjective thing for a lot of people. Become something better, than what you think humanity is right now. I get it that there are people who are behind that. There's actually a lot of religious people, if you believe it or not, that are behind that. And that gets into some very strange places. But there's people who think that way that I respect, that are friends. I get it. Okay. Myself, I also want to be more than we are right now. Okay. I want us to be more empathetic, healthier, live longer. All these kinds of things. Okay. But I am not really interested in technological solutions, like machine solutions, jamming, like Neuralink or these other things, jamming shit into my head, into my skull, and all this other stuff, like, or even, well, anyway, those are the parts that I'm not interested in. But really, as far as like becoming more than human, I'm on, like I'm there. I am so supportive of that. Okay. And so I know in the abstract sense, people that are looking more in a cyborg direction, we kind of have the same goal. My hope is that, we can coexist. Like my hope is that people don't go cyborg and then say, okay, all the fleshlings need to fucking die off. Right. We need, they're a disease, they're a problem. We need to off them. Just like I would hope that, people who go again, in the abstract, a transhumanist route, but through organic means, okay, I would hope that they would not say, well, all right, all the little people need to die. Kind of speaking of augments, like a Khan Noonien Singh situation, right? I mean, that's not, the eugenics wars. That's not what I'm about here. Okay. And I'm not talking about gene editing. I'm not talking about like, any of this kind of shit. Okay. That is, I guess, how I want transhumanism to go forward would be a very long and different conversation than what we're having here. But basically, yeah, like I'm very wary of telling people, oh, the solution is to, like, kind of like this emailer mentioned, is to turn us into machines ourselves. No. Like, I mean, I don't think we can, I don't believe for a second that we are actually capable of uploading our brains. I don't think, even if you said you did that, I don't think that the tin can that you supposedly imprinted all those memory engrams into is that person. I just don't believe it, because I don't think you're a person without your entire body. I have a different perspective, and I'm not the only one. There are people far more interested than I who have a very different perspective on how the nervous system works in its relationship with the brain. Okay, there are at least a couple different ways that you can think about how the brain operates, and I think it operates in a different direction, I think, than most might want to consider. Okay, and it comes down to, does the nervous system serve the brain, or does the brain serve the nervous system? I am in the latter camp. Okay, so getting rid of my body and replacing it with cybernetic parts is, in my opinion, getting rid of me. Am I going to stop anybody from, becoming the more than human that they want to be, or the more than they are that they want to be? Forget about it being about humans. It's about being more than you are, perhaps. Keep it at an individual level, okay? Then that doesn't interfere with choice. Then fine, go for it, okay? But that's, doing it cybernetically I have no interest in that. That's not my route, but that doesn't mean I'm not about working and engaging in acts as hard as I can to become more than I am. I certainly am. And I mean, and understand quick, we'll get into the BDSM question here. Understand quick, this isn't new for me. I talked about let's see, we just celebrated episode 350. So 250 episodes ago, in my first fictional episode, 2099, I talked about growing computers, as in like growing them like a cornfield almost, where all technology is organic. It's not something that is, it's not a machine anymore like that. So again, this isn't new for me. Okay. This is the direction for things to go. But anyway, okay. So let's get into the BDSM question, and then we can get into a little bit of an album of the week, and then we'll wrap this baby up. Here we go. So, and look, if you have questions on any of what I just said, please send them in bbs@sovereigntech.com. You can comment on the, go ahead and comment on the episode itself on the website or on Podbean or whatever, and I will get to it. So here we go. Stallion. You need to have Ellen, okay. I mean, I already I read this a couple weeks ago and said I would get to it, just so that people could kind of think about it. But whatever, I'll read it again. Stallion, you need to have Ellen on more often. That was such a fun Q&A, which, by the way, have you ever considered just doing a more laid back, or I already answered all that. It feels like a long time since I've heard you talk about sex, so it was refreshing and, again, fun to hear it on episode 340. And that's the Q&A, I think, of 340. And just to hear you talk more about it, I have a question for you, Savzu. My partner and I are kinky, very kinky, BDSM kinky. I seem to remember you being very hard on, but joke about hard on, BDSM in the past. And I know you've called yourself a feminist in the past, and to my shock, I came across an entire blog that is feminist and anti-BDSM. Do you agree with these points? I find the idea that it reinforces authoritarianism to be pretty stupid. I never feel more free than when I'm engaging in play. What say you, Mr. Sovereign? And again, please have Ellen on more. And as I said before, yes, definitely we'll have Ellen on more. Again, our schedules are just insane right now. As far as being a feminist, like I said, I would go by the term feminist ally. Those in those circles know why. So I won't deep dive into that in the interest of time. But now I did read, and it's lengthy, and it's some odd like 20 points, and then they elaborate on each point. I'm not going to read all 20 points to you here. The link is in the show notes if you want to read it. I shared the link a couple weeks ago so that people could read it ahead of time if they wanted to. So, yeah, I will address this. And their arguments are cogent. They are ones that I don't think they're, no pun intended, I don't think they're too out of left field. They are arguments that I've heard before. Some of these arguments are arguments that at varying points in my life I've agreed with. Okay. Have I been hard on BDSM in the past? Yes, I have come out somewhat on BDSM. Now, I want to clarify some things here. Okay. BDSM, I mean, most people know what that means, bondage, dominance, and sadomasochism. Okay. Understand that BDSM, okay, is a very large, it encapsulates a lot. Okay. It's very similar to libertarianism, right? There are people who think libertarianism equates anarchism. There are people who think libertarianism is capital L libertarianism, and it's something that is a political party. Obviously, those stand in complete opposition to each other, but they both use the same word, and they do. Okay? BDSM is kind of the same thing. Like, there are aspects of BDSM, I think, that all get kind of lumped in together and confused with each other. You don't have to, things that get wrapped, you can practice things that get wrapped into BDSM that have nothing to do with, more specifically, the arguments that are, or some of which is more specifically the arguments that are in this blog post. Okay. For example, Okay, and let me be clear here. There are parts of what also would get lumped into BDSM that I, to this day, have not changed my opinion on, and I have an absolute hard no, and will absolutely come out and say that I think if people get turned on by X, Y, and Z, there's something wrong. Like it's therapy time, and I'll say it that strongly. Okay. I'm I'm a very sex positive person, obviously. Longtime listeners know that. Okay. But there are some things that get done within the community, that's in reference to BDSM, that I just go, no, no, that's not right. Okay. So, for example, okay, you have what is D/S, dominance and submission. Okay. This gets wrapped up in BDSM. However, a D/S or a DS relationship, which are far more common than I think people realize, okay, where one person's the dominant, the other's submissive, and it's more common consciously and unconsciously, I think, than people realize. That gets wrapped in with BDSM. However, it does not require half or even 7/8 of what gets also bundled in with BDSM. DS can be something completely on its own. Okay. Believe it or not, I have no problem with DS relationships. None whatsoever. Okay. My real issue over the years, and the parts that I still stand very much against, as far as with BDSM, I think that if you are fetishizing, there's something called murder play, where you are literally fetishizing and like you're murdering somebody while you're having sex with them. This is a real thing in BDSM. That's a hard no. Something's not working upstairs, friends. Okay, like I'm tapping my forehead here. Something's not working up there. Something's off, and I'll say that because, like, the idea of fetishizing, not just death. Okay, it's one thing if you were fetishizing, I guess, or if you were fantasizing, playing out a fantasy that, your wife's the princess and you're the brave knight and you slayed whatever, and you saved her. And I mean, it's conventional, but hey, you know what? Have your time with your fantasies. That's why they're fantasies. Okay, that's one thing. But to actually like fetishize killing the person you're fucking, anyone that doesn't think that that's wildly screwed up, I don't know what to say. And I'm open to hearing the arguments. I've heard them, and I just sit there slack-jawed, like, are you for real? And like those aspects, when it goes that far, okay, that's where I have always had a problem with BDSM. But a lot of elements of BDSM, frankly, I've never really had issue with. I mean, and there's ways to explain where even things that sound like would be bringing on some kind of pain genuinely do bring on, a pleasure of some type. I mean, like there really are. Okay. Now, where the bulk of this blog post that you found, its anti-BDSM stance mainly comes down to is that it is, even just in the bedroom, it is reinforcing hierarchies, okay, and it is reinforcing like domination structures, and it's reinforcing like the CEO mentality or the tyrant mentality or whatever. But and I kind of get that, but I think the real issue at play here, no pun intended, I think it comes down to a lot of all right, so here's something that you've got to understand. Now, I have, and in fact, I was doing an audiobook version of this. I'm still finishing that audiobook, and we'll have the full version of it out there, even though I already did like 15 chapters of it and released them. There is the book by William Moulton Marston called The Emotions of Normal People. Okay. It is a classic text in psychology. It's one that has been bastardized at times. I've talked about that. I talked about that in the introduction when I started the audiobook for it and everything. But it's based around this idea of DISC theory, which DISC stands for dominance, inducement, submission, and compliance. Okay. Now, I think that there's a lot to this. Okay, when I read this, and in fact, really the very first chapter, the introduction to the book, The Emotions of Normal People, brings up a very, very important point that I've never read anywhere else. William Marston basically brings up the point that the words that we have for a lot of emotions that we feel, for example, fear, even love, so many other things, right? These are words, they are not scientific terms. They are terms, they have, and here's the problem, they have medical scientific diagnoses, okay? But they themselves are not scientific terms. They are concepts, not just the terms themselves, but they are also concepts that were lifted effectively from Victorian era novels and then just put into not just a popular consciousness, but they were put into medical scientific texts. But they have no medical scientific basis. That's a problem. That's a really, really big problem. Okay? And so even like concepts like being turned on, horny, and all of these other things, like we have some idea of what these things mean, but they are based in emotions which these words, that they're descriptors, were just lifted from, fanciful novels that again have no medical or scientific basis. And we run into a real issue, okay, with this, where some of these terms and some of the things we say that we're feeling, or even our own our self-talk in our own heads, I think can confuse us quite a bit. And another word that has a real problem is this word hierarchy, okay? There are in life, okay, and you, again, if there's any confusion, I guarantee you it's just in the terms. Okay, I'll try and explain it and give examples as best I can so that you know what I'm saying. There are effectively natural hierarchies. Okay, I've said this many times. Like in the skateboarding world, not everybody's Tony Hawk. He is the top of his game, and you can prove that through how many tricks he did. I mean, like there are objective metrics, okay, that you can lay out of why he is at the top. Now that is technically a hierarchy. Natural hierarchy is not even the best word for that, but my point being, okay, is that everybody has different skill sets, different abilities, I mean, and the problem with just wanting to write off hierarchies in general, okay, I mean, are you going to go rescue the wolves, right? Where the wolves you have like the alpha wolf, right? Or the omega wolf and blah, blah, blah. Are you going to rescue them from their hierarchies? No, because most people recognize they have a natural hierarchy. Is that based around a kind of dominance? Sure. But here is the rub. Stop. Don't think you know where I'm going with this. Here's the problem with that. We are anthropomorphizing concepts that we have onto wolves. Okay, so these whole notions of dominance and submission run into very real problems. If you are in, say, like the DS community or the BDSM community, if you get, like say a top, okay, who is generally a dominant, or a bottom who's a submissive, all of them will admit, or if you read any books on the subject, all of them will admit that all of the real power is with the submissive. The submissive has all the power because they are the ones giving themselves. Okay, power is in giving, not in taking. And I know that you want to talk about anachronistic. I mean, you want something that sounds like paradoxical. I get it. It is a paradox. And the reason it's a paradox is because we don't really have the best words for all this. Okay, the dominant is, and you're not reinforcing dominance when it is a dominant who is very well aware of where the real power comes from. And I think that there is a very special kind of love. And again, if you're hearing this, you're going, wait, wow, this doesn't make any sense. I'm telling you, yeah, I might not be doing the best job of describing it. I am totally open to that. But then at the same time, we don't have the words for all this shit, for all of these experiences. And maybe some of these experiences, maybe some of these emotions that we feel, maybe could never have words because they're that powerful. I mean, you see them getting expressed with somebody, I don't know, with a ball gag in their mouth, or with a a collar on or wearing some wacky outfit or who knows, or, piercings or who the hell knows what, right? But those are often enough. Those are just those are physical manifestations of emotional expression. Okay. And we really have to do like a complete reevaluation of the terms for emotions and relationships and a lot of stuff to really, even begin to make sense of it. Now, if somebody, okay, so I'm going to give you a concept here, and then I want to break down into like the idea that somehow this is reinforcing hierarchies like we get in government and business, because I just don't agree with that, because the relationship is, all right, let me talk on that. The relationship is not the same. No president loves everybody underneath him. No CEO loves every worker underneath him. I mean, they just don't. That's why they fire people, or that's why a president, why they do all kinds of terrible shit. Okay, because they're politicians by nature. I mean, anybody interested in being a politician, is, I mean, talk about another thing is where you're fucked up in the head. I mean, anyway, those are very, very, you can't even compare those kind of artificial hierarchies with the, whatever hierarchy gets decided upon within a loving relationship. They are two totally different things. They're not related at all. One is not supporting the other. And that's that is the conclusion of this whole article, is that, even just a DS or a, BDSM relationship is basically reinforcing everything else that happens, all the other hierarchical damage and authoritarianist damage that happens, writ large in the world. They are not remotely the same kind of relationships. They're not even fucking close. They are not close. There's no association between the two. I mean, if your boyfriend likes pretending that he's the president of the United States, I mean, I'd be wondering about your boyfriend. I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay. Or even like, and this is sadly very common, how many people that are, that actually, so, and this is where things do get kind of weird, is when you have like police officers that are into BDSM. Look, there are, and I can only put it in these terms, there are unhealthy people in the BDSM community. I'm not going to deny that. Okay. And if they do express it outside of, the bedroom, and I don't mean between you and another person. Like if they want to put their dominance on everybody, that's a problem. Okay. As to where if the dominant submissive relationship is just between you and a lover or lovers, that's wholly different than from you going out there and expressing genuine authoritarianism and hierarchical dominance, over another person who didn't choose. And, that gets into the whole issue of consent. If somebody consents to do it, who the fuck are you to tell them what to do? I mean, again, if you're consenting to murder play, I've got a problem. I mean, I really, really do. Like you've got to be wondering about the person who finds that sexy. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I can admit that there's certainly plenty of people in the BDSM community that do have unhealthy expressions outside of the bedroom. But that doesn't, that gets into an even bigger conversation. But again, to relate all, hierarchy, to say that all hierarchies, okay, and that's a very broad term, to say that all of those are representative of authoritarianism in all aspects of society, I think is just way off base. And you're also anthropomorphizing in all kinds of ways, not just on like the animal world, but on, on humans in general, where like you're attributing malice to, like loving relationships, and that, no, and there is and this is speaking from a very conventional sense, okay, and speaking from a gender binary sense. There's the work of John Norman, who I am a big fan of. I love the Gore novels. I mean, I really love the Gore novels. I'm a big fan. Okay. John Norman makes a point in his book Imaginative Sex, and you got to understand how much John Norman like really influenced BDSM, that whole community. I mean, the idea of people wearing collars, which, hey, whatever, rock and roll. I mean, you can't look. And I know a lot of you, there are people, and I've seen them, and somehow they say this straight faced. They're okay with wearing a wedding ring, but if you're wearing a collar, they think that's nuts. I think that's outrageous. In the abstract, in the broad sense that you're thinking, like, they are the same thing. But do I have necessarily a problem with people wearing wedding rings or collars? Fuck no. No, that can be a great expression of belonging to each other, not owning each other necessarily, but belonging to each other. And hey, great. However you want to go about that. You want to wear certain clothing to do that, fine. You want to wear a certain jewelry to express that, dynamite. The problem's not in those kinds of expressions. The problem is where the problem can be is in someone else's head. But anyway, John Norman makes a great point. Again, he's speaking from a very conventional gender binary sense. Okay. But, people can choose to exist within like the certain extremes of conventional gender, or they can choose to live outside of those things. All of which, be an NB, or not be, but, however they want to express it, rock and roll. I've said this before, and I still stand by this. We don't even know how many genders there are, right? We know how many. I mean, there's biological types. That's a different story. Those are somewhat limited, but genders, we have no idea, and I don't really care. That's not my field of interest. People can be whatever they want to be. But I've said this before. I strongly identify as a quote unquote man, and in some ways, in very conventional ways, frankly. Okay. So John Norman brings up this point that, a man wants to feel free, and a woman wants to feel loved. Now, do people have to live by that? Is that some kind of biological truth? No. Okay. You could choose to go by these things. But his idea is that, in like a dominant submission relationship, that a man feels truly free when he feels free to express anything to his lover. Okay. That being in this case, the submissive. And then a woman feels loved when she feels that, when she sees, or when she gets to experience that freedom of expression, okay, and it is being put upon her, that there's that trust, which is the very, at the start of love, a huge part of having actual love in this world, okay. So we oversimplify this blog post really oversimplifies shit, and has a lack of understanding, and we have terrible words for all this stuff. But what gets expressed and looks like BDSM a lot of times, I think, can actually be a very, very beautiful thing. A very beautiful thing. And again, it's a manifestation of expressing a lot of different emotions and relationships. But make no mistake, I mean, when in a dominance and submission, a DS relationship, those people belong to each other. Like, the dominant is as much the slave as the submissive, is perceived to be to the dominant. I mean, but the power is really always with the submissive, and this is what people completely miss. And again, and then the biggest problem with this article is that it's attributing, like, completely artificially conceived, not even necessarily unnatural, but completely artificially conceived hierarchical concepts like government and things like this, and somehow attributing it to anything remotely like human love, when those just aren't fucking related at all. You can't transpose one onto the other. It's a lie to say that anything related to do with government has anything to do with love. Government is the most anti-love concept in the world. Okay. Now, but are there natural hierarchies throughout nature that have everything perhaps to do with some kind of love or empathy? Absolutely. That's not an argument. That's not saying that there are people that are better than you or deserve more than you or any of this kind of crap. That's not saying that at all. Again, those are all anthropomorphized concepts, and you're mixing all these terms up, and you're mixing all these relationships up, and you're trying to oversimplify the world when it's not that simple. Existence is not that simple. Sure as fuck isn't for humans. Okay, but I guarantee it isn't for animals, for other animals either, because we are just animals at the end of the day. So, yeah, my harshness with BDSM, I mean, there may have been times in the past where I have talked, maybe a little harder, more so against it. But no, I mean, there's plenty of aspects and plenty of people who participate in the BDSM community that I do have a genuine problem with, and I would have no problem bringing it up. But I am not going to, I'll gladly say, like murder play, I'll gladly say, no, that's wrong just across the board. Happily say that to you. Okay. But, will I ever like say that broadly about BDSM? No. No, I can't do that. I can't do that. I mean, even I know even at points where I can kind of think back to where I might have been really harsh, say on BDSM or something. I know I had fun engaging in, and maybe even both ways of roles that could be considered dominance and submission. So again, all these terms are incredibly confusing, and this blog post is just making a fatal error of, again, transposing concepts like government to the bedroom. I'm not saying there aren't people who do that. They do, but that's the problem with the person, not with DS relationships or necessarily BDSM acts, or the community. Okay, like this is what happens when we ignore the individual, right? This is what happens. So, okay, let's wrap this up. Let's get into our album of the week, and we have a doozy. In fact, I'm going to go with a classic. This is an album from 1982. And really, you could re-listen to their entire discography. Jimmy Jameson sadly passed away a few years ago. But the band, don't laugh. Listen to it first. The band Survivor. Okay, now Rock Candy, a record company, they have been remastering and re-releasing basically the entire Survivor catalog. And since they've done so, I've been re-listening to these albums because I'm always interested in what Rock Candy puts out there, and I always, end up finding some kind of, just diamond in the rough, some gem in a lot of these re-releases that most people have totally forgotten about. And fuck, I mean, what a great band this was. I mean, I like Jimmy Jameson's stuff as a solo artist, which, I mean, for a long time in my life, I didn't even know he was the lead singer of Survivor, right? Singing Eye of the Tiger and all this. I just knew him as the Baywatch guy, and so I dug his music outside of that. But then I found out he was in Survivor. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's why, half the Rocky soundtracks are so goddamn good. But I've been re-listening to a lot of the Survivor music, and man, it just goes to show. Re-listening to this stuff, and most of their albums came out in the 80s. I think the first one came out in 79. They only have 5-6 albums. Like studio albums. And particularly the album which Rock Candy just got the rights to, which was Eye of the Tiger, which that song is kind of initially from. Oh man, like the songs, you could say they're corny. You got to like this kind of, softer rock music. Okay. And I get that you got to be able to kind of appreciate this sort of thing. But at the very least, if you just check out things that I mentioned, even if you're never going to listen to them again, take notice lyrically. Okay. First off, I think the musical, I mean, anybody that can write music like this, I think is fucking brilliant. They can do something I cannot do. Okay. Does that make them better than me? Well, it doesn't music, but it doesn't make them a better person, right? Not to get confused here. Anyway, so, whatever you want, unless you're a listener, and maybe I have listeners who are multi-platinum selling artists or something, not that should really be the gauge of whether or not music is good. I don't think you have room to talk to say that they suck. Okay. Unless you're comparing them to themselves, like, all right, this album isn't as good as their last album or something like that. Right. But listen to it. I mean, it's great musicianship in my opinion, for one, but for two, lyrically, these songs are really about something. Like, they're deep. They're telling whole stories inside of, 5 minutes. And it's amazing to hear that and contrast that to today, where it seems like every song is, could basically be attributed and could mean fucking anything or to anything. It's very weird, and it strikes you when you listen to music done by people who are masters of their craft. like Survivor really were. Okay, fine. You don't like that kind of music? Fine. Okay, there's plenty of kinds of music I don't like. I'm not the biggest fan of rap, but I get that Eminem's good at it, or that Dr. Dre was, or or Biggie or whatever. Like, I understand. Okay, I can admit that because, I'm not just some fanboy or something. So anyway, yeah, I mean, you listen, like I listened to the album Eye of the Tiger. I mean, there's these incredible songs. It opens up with Eye of the Tiger, but then there's Feels Like Love, Hesitation Dance, The One That Really Matters, I'm Not That Man Anymore, Children of the Night. It seems like everybody in the 80s had to have a song called Children of the Night, but whatever. Whitesnakes is probably the best as far as those go. But you get my point, is that these songs, when you listen to them, it's just amazing how they're really about something and they're very specific. And, I'm always reminded, and I bring this up many times, I'm always reminded of the laugh if you want here too. I don't give a shit. Bon Jovi in his song, Last Man Standing, there's the lyric where it says, his songs were more than music. They were pictures of his soul. And, even though I'm an atheist, you get the metaphor here. Bottom line being, no, today songs are barely even music and there is no soul. Like there are no pictures of the soul being shown there. There's no experience. I've had a problem with this for a while where like you have, I don't know, you have like these child stars that Disney puts out there, right? And like they're talking about like all these like, crazy tragedies and everything. And not to say that young people can't have tragedies. Certainly their parents can inflict them, unfortunately. And that is absolutely as tragic as it gets. Okay, but they're like talking about all these like crazy situations that happen to them, in relationships and stuff. It's like, wait, you're 10. Like that doesn't click. And so anyway, to have people, these are, Survivor, these are people that lived, they weren't on social media, so they were actually outside, or they were actually looking around. They experienced things. They actually experienced shit. And they sing about it. And it's a powerful experience to encounter that music and to see in audio. I know that sounds, appreciate it for what I'm saying here. You get to experience. How about that? You get to experience those, the pictures of their soul when you listen to this kind of powerful music. So yeah, Eye of the Tiger, of course, great song, right? Everybody knows that fucking song. But on this album, there's so many other great songs. On all Vital Signs, that's another one of their albums that I was listening to. Dynamite. I mean, songs that'll just rip your heart out and or make you, empower you, just make you feel like, yeah, I can get through this too and all this stuff. And that's so great. We don't have music like that anymore. What do you got? Fucking Carrie Underwood singing about being a champion? Champion of what? And what, really? It's all just nonsense, but here's music where people are really talking about real shit. And I find myself craving that quite a bit. Maybe you would too. So if you want to, why don't you check out some of Survivor's classic albums. Anyway, that is it for this Q&A. We'll wrap this baby up. Well, we'll see what other content comes out for November. There probably won't be any other episodes yet for November, but we are getting things to the point where I can record much more regularly to get out a lot of the bonus stuff. You'll always get your sovereign text. Don't you worry about that. But anyway, that's it for this episode. I will see all of you, on the other side.